On YouTube, I've been watching these videos by leftists and socialists that respond to libertarians on freedom and how they try to refute the libertarian analysis on freedom, and I found their arguments to be based on really questionable assumptions. So all of the leftists have the argument on freedom that there's a distinction between positive and negative freedom, in that positive freedom is about the freedom to do something, whereas negative freedom is freedom from and freedom from coercion. Leftists like Adam Something and Vorsh make the argument that if you're in the barren desert, you have ultimate negative freedom because nobody can coerce you to do anything. And of course you have no positive freedom because there's nothing but sand, there's no water, you'll soon die, and you can barely do anything. And so the argument that they're trying to make here is that the libertarian goal, that is presumably about removing all, obtaining maximum negative freedom, is wasteful and pointless because you'll have no positive freedoms to make life enjoyable, and you would have no prosperity and you'll die in the middle of the desert. But just like all socialist arguments, this is based on really insane assumptions that are quite laughable if you think about it. For example, why would you be in the middle of a desert? How would that work? No one wakes up in the middle of a desert, and in reality, everyone lives in a society where water is not an issue. And of course, in order to live in society, you have to work. And of course, libertarians acknowledge this. But do you see what the issue is here? It's assumed that libertarians are for absolute negative freedom, yet they clearly are not. Every libertarian tells you that in capitalism you must work, and therefore, the socialists would have to say that the libertarians are not for absolute negative freedom, but rather the libertarians support many many negative freedoms. And if you actually think about it, these many negative freedoms translate into many positive freedoms. And remember, libertarians don't support anarcho-primitivism, but rather capitalism, which is based on exchanging currency, in which there must be a single currency in a country or a community that is defined by an authority that must be printed by an authoritative source. Furthermore, socialists make wild assumptions on what is positive and negative freedom. Socialists say that the freedom to not pay taxes is a negative freedom, while having free college is apparently a positive freedom. But if you think about why these assumptions are quite problematic, it's easy to realize that if you have more money, then you have access to hundreds of additional positive freedoms in the market economy that is based on money. And so it doesn't take a genius to realize that having more freedom from the taxman means more money that you have because of less taxes, and so ultimately having hundreds of more freedoms as you have more money to buy more things with. Think about what you can do with your money. You can buy more washing machines, you can buy more chairs, tables, desks, furnitures, you can rent a nicer apartment, you can buy a car, you can do lots of different things. You can buy a bike, you can buy a second bike. Ultimately, you have to realize that every negative freedom has not just one, but many corresponding positive freedoms. So libertarians being for many negative freedoms also translates into many positive freedoms. Also, the socialist version of positive freedom is not very positive. If you look at free college, for example, the positive freedom is that you can go to college, when without free college, you cannot go to college. And to be kind, I could say that being able to go to college means that you have a positive freedom of getting a better paying job. But in reality, we know that getting a better paying job isn't really guaranteed from going to college, especially if you're studying something like English literature, African studies, or journalism, where you'll just get out of college and you'll be working as a coffee barrister or something, which doesn't pay a lot. So the argument is that to chain these positive freedoms together is problematic, as just because you have one positive freedom, it doesn't mean that you'll get another positive freedom, especially if you actually try to think about where people go after college. And even then, paying for college through student debt still means that you get the positive freedom of going to college because you can go to college, and the only downside is a monetary sacrifice that is a student loan that you must pay off over a long time period. But of course, the leftists don't care about utilitarian arguments, but more for very theoretical arguments that are based on broad assumptions. You kind of have to think about, in reality, if you have a 43,000 student debt like I have, then do you actually lose any positive freedoms? Because my consequence is that my income over £30,000 is taxed at 10%. So if I pay £43,000, that's 13,000 over. If I earn 45,000 a year, 10% of that is what I have to pay off my student debt. And so, yeah, the only way that you can say that student debt means less freedom is if you acknowledge that having less money means less ability to buy stuff with your money. But in that case, that just doesn't work if you're on the left, because on the left you have to acknowledge that paying taxes means you have less money, therefore less positive freedom. So the left can't say that you have less positive freedom by having less money, and at the same time saying that there's no problem in you paying more in taxes. Also, assuming that the government doesn't have a deficit or has a tiny deficit and it just runs the economy on a balanced budget, you also have to realise that it's not really a positive freedom if everybody has to pay more taxes to pay for somebody's education. And in that case, all you're doing is passing the buck over. So, in summary, libertarians aren't for absolute negative freedom. They are for many positive freedoms, and if you acknowledge that having more money means hundreds of more positive freedoms, then libertarians are for more positive freedom than the left. And also, the so called positive freedoms may not actually be very positive if you think about what you can actually do with that positive freedom. Anyway, that's it. Bye bye.